More than 60% of Americans have one chronic disease, and 40% of Americans have two or more. Americans spend twice as much on average as our peer countries, and yet there's a diabetes rate of 45% in this country.
We have pesticides all over our foods, contaminants in our water. We have microplastics.
60% of the calories that are consumed by Americans are highly processed. People be using ChatGPT to diagnose themselves right now.
People that we look up to, the celebrities, influencers, are starting to be people that prioritize their health, right? Health is looked at as a status symbol.
So what the hell do we do? More than 60% of Americans have one chronic disease, and 40% of Americans have two or more. Why are we in the situation with the healthcare system that we have, where we're sicker and we're sadder? What can we do about it?
I just want to pause for a second, because that's such a great question and a really important set of statistics and a perspective that we don't talk about enough. I think it's very much so been in the zeitgeist as of late. And there's a multitude of reasons that we've gotten there, many of which, or some of which I would say, are in good intention, right? I think we've built this foundational health system in the US today that's really, really good at solving for the reactive, right? When you break a bone, you have some form of disease, we have a pharmaceutical, a procedure otherwise for a large set of things that allows us to rectify. And I think that system actually gets a lot of flack. And I also think it's extremely important, right? I think we built a system that works to some degree to solve for those situations. Now, how did we get to the place where we have a very, very sick population? I think it's a few things. I think at the most macro level, the thing that comes to mind right away is our food system, right? We have pesticides all over our foods. We have contaminants in our water. We have microplastics even in the CPG products that we're typically consuming. And I think some combination of all of those three things working together has created a situation where we have the proliferation of chronic conditions. I don't think that maybe these things have been the actual impetus or the genesis of the chronic condition, but it's allowed for a bodily system to open a chasm where chronic conditions can exist and fester and grow. So I think foundationally, the food system is a really big one. And anyone who wants to swim upstream of that food system, it's really expensive. You're maybe a bit of an outlier, right? When you want to go buy organic, you have to travel a little bit further to go to a Sprouts or a Whole Foods or things of that nature. And then the second piece, I think, is it's become so socially and culturally normalized, such that swimming with the stream is one of, in the very mainstream, is one of typically not being overwhelmingly healthy, right? The restaurants that we have at our disposal that are very accessible, that are quick, are not the best choices when it comes to making the decision if I don't want to be in that state. So when I think of it, I think there's two layers. There's the food system is a really, really big one. And then the second one is the social cultural element that, regardless of any other system that you talk about at the macro level, makes it really, really hard to buck the norm unless you surround yourself with a community of people that's also thinking that way. And to get there is a whole set of tasks, including reinventing identity and otherwise. So
why are people feeling social pressure when they want to be healthy?
I think it's just one of feeling social pressure whenever you're swimming upstream. So I don't think it's just unique to health. I think it's unique to anything that you want to do that might be out of the typical norm. I'll give an example, right? If someone is living in New York City, 25, in investment banking, right, working really long hours, and their standard cadence is working a ton, not sleeping a lot, going out on the weekends, and drinking alcohol and doing other things that aren't necessarily conducive to health. So if you've gotten yourself in that situation because that's the thing that you've been told, right? You went to the 4 university, you graduated, you did the thing, and now you're in a place where you make this decision one day of, I want to be healthy, whatever that means for that individual, right? Well, where do you even start? Well, I've got to change all the friends that I have. I might have to change the job I have in terms of the work-life balance. I have to stop going out, which is the activity, so I have to find a thing to replace it. There's all of these different tactical components. And then even more so than that, you have a complete identity shift, right? I used to be the guy that went out. I used to be the guy that DoorDashed. I used to be the person that did this. And instead, you've got to completely recreate yourself as someone who goes to othership at 9 p.m. on a Friday instead of going out. So I think the social pressure is probably one that's actually, what's probably a little bit more interesting is think about the internal pressure one places on self to maintain identity, and the identity shift that's actually required because health is so central to identity is one that creates a situation where it's really, really challenging. You really have to put yourself out there to completely recreate how you spend your time, because everything we do in some way or another is health.
How did we get to the place where being healthy is swimming upstream, though?
Many things. I think there's been a multitude of macro systemic choices that have been made such that if you just go with the norm, you are unhealthy, right? All of the restaurants, many of the restaurants that we're eating at aren't necessarily, are leveraging the food system that we've built, which has pesticides all over our food and multiple other toxins and contaminants that aren't really endocrine disruptors or otherwise that aren't conducive to maintaining a balanced system. I think there are other large industries at play that, when balanced, I think have some value. Like, going out to a bar, things of that nature. I still think one can do those things and be healthy, but I think there's incentives on that side as well, that it's not 1 beer, 2 beers, it's 6 or 8. And I think incentives that way have made it really, really challenging. And then I think there's also this layer of not really truly at scale thinking about health proactively just yet. We're seeing that shift, and there's a multitude of people doing it. And but really, people think about health as okay, I start having symptoms, I start have this presenting condition, I don't feel well, I can't get out of bed, whatever it might be, and then I go check in with the doctor or the clinician or whoever the health professional might be. And instead, there's this seismic shift happening, and I think it's that way of thinking, that mental model, that helps us escape the system that's been built upstream, which isn't necessarily completely built for our individual incentives, but for other incentives.
So let's talk about the system itself, right? The healthcare system. Something that I've noticed, and I want to hear your thoughts on the healthcare system as a system, but something that I've noticed that is a detriment to the people is the gates and the points at which you can enter or exit the system. So you have one time during the year that you can sign up or not sign up, right? So you have open enrollment, November, December, whenever it is. You have open enrollment. If you're actively in the middle of treatment or getting an appointment, or you've waited 4 months to get your MRI, and now you have an open enrollment period, you're not going to necessarily change providers, right? That is a place where people, I think, get stuck, and they get stuck into whatever system that they're in. And then you have the providers that they have MRR, they have monthly recurring revenue coming in from all of the people. They are not incentivized, in my opinion. The healthcare providers are not incentivized to rapidly solve your problems because they have monthly recurring revenue. What are the other parts of the system that are keeping us sick and stuck?
I really like your point around MRR and the business side of it, because I think that the capitalistic nature and monetization of health is still important, right? At the end of the day, we have to build a system that encourages and innovation, and I think that capitalizing and having MRR is an important thing to drive that engine of always reaching for the next best mousetrap. I do think that's important. And it creates a situation where it's not necessarily incentivized to the individual. So I think a really interesting statistic related to that point is that 80% of large health system revenue is from procedures and pharmaceuticals, right? Either the one-time big upfront payment, and then maybe there's attached a recurring revenue model that is the pharmaceutical, thinking about it in business language. And I think that's an important thing for people to lean into when that situation presents itself, and there's going to be continued situations where that is the right answer. But I don't think it should represent 80% of revenue. I don't think the system has been built in a very intuitive a kind of human designed way that allows us to kind of swim and autonomously operate. So I think that's a big piece that we could really lean into of making an impact and changing, is allow people to autonomously change and route themselves in a sense. Because I think we're getting routed a lot by a system that's been, built for other reasons.
Yeah. And then it's cost prohibitive, right? I think Americans spend twice as much on average as our peer countries. And yet I think there's a diabetes rate of 45% in this country. In general, we're more obese than most other countries per capita. We have the chronic conditions, like I mentioned earlier, but we're spending twice as much as our peer countries. And anecdotally, people are not going to the hospital when they need to because of deductibles and the overall cost, the ambulance cost. People want to take Ubers, to the urgent care, or Ubers to emergency because they don't want to pay their ambulance bill. And so there's all these people that not only are we spending more and we're sicker, but there's a lot of people that aren't even going. And so I don't know what to do about that, but where do we make changes to the system to be able to make it more affordable, more accessible, where people want to go to the hospital?
The big thing I think about a lot is, how do we shift our mental model and interpretation of what healthcare means and what health means, right? I think when most people think of healthcare, they think of white lab coats, they think of, your flu shot, they think of, swallowing cough syrup that doesn't taste very good as a kid. There's not very many pleasant experiences when you think about healthcare. It's waiting in a waiting room, holding your mom's hand in there. And so I think that's the first shift, is we need to start thinking about and experiencing and interacting with our health in an exciting way. And I think that starts with interacting with it proactively, right? Thinking of health as not necessarily a pill to be taken or a procedure to be had or a prescription, but something that can help us show up as our best selves, as the best dad that we can, as the best mom that we can, as best executive as we can, brother, sister, community member, rather than, oh my gosh, I have these symptoms and now it's stage 4 and I need to treat it. So I think there's just a mental model shift that needs to happen at the most macro level that changes the way we think about our health. I'm not sure that, to challenge you on that, I'm not sure the hospital will ever be super fun to go to.
Yeah.
But I do think that shifting our mental model is really, really crucial for changing the way that people interact with health, such that the hospital might not be fun to go to, but they go when it's needed, and are there when it's important.
Is healthcare a fundamental human right?
It's a really interesting question. I do think that fundamentally, regardless of the political component, that everyone should and will have access to high quality, proactive, intuitive, personalized, data-driven, even AI-infused health that really speaks to what is deeply going on with you and what do you want, what next layer do you want to get to, right? I think that everyone should and will have that. At the political level, I think it's really complex of all the different pieces there of what that actually looks like and how do we enable that. I do think that selfishly, some of what we're doing at Superpower and what others in the space very much so are doing all of together is enabling that is a really important shift. Yeah,
and you said that you don't know if the hospital will ever be fun, and it may not be. But what I think we're seeking and what we want is to walk away from that experience feeling like we were truly taken care of, and not have to worry about the bill that's coming. Even if it's going to be a big bill, but like transparency in billing, transparency in costs, and like a comprehensive look at us as human beings so that we feel better. And so that, there's a lot of people now that are doing like sound baths. We're doing gut health stuff. Like there's all these other things that are coming to the forefront that are, I think, truly helping people. And I don't know if the hospitals will ever offer sound baths, right? I don't know if I would want to go to a healthcare or a hospital sound bath, but I think Americans in particular, they look at other places and other things that they experience. like the holistic practices, and then they go to a hospital, and it's sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum. And the hospital is supposed to be the place where they heal, but it's an expensive, terrible experience. And so even just from like a customer experience standpoint, like why can we not get to feel better when we leave the hospital? I don't think that's something that's too much to ask for people.
I definitely don't think it's too much to ask. I think that over time we will see actually this bifurcation where the hospital becomes really a procedure center more than a place actually truly to heal. I think other places will become, and already have started becoming, places to heal. I think to your point on the most important point that I don't think is happening at scale right now is being seen as a human. And when you go to a doctor's office visit, and this is all generalities, you're in and you're out. You're not really. When's the last time you had a really deep conversation with a health professional, clinician or physician or otherwise, that really focused on you and just opened the door with some amount of structure, but opened the door and said, how are you doing? What is your health like today? What mental health, physical health, right? And kind of can start to categorize it. We don't have those conversations right now. And those are the most important conversations to have, right? There's the protocols, there's the supplements, there's the lifestyle modifications. And of course, those are all important, really important things to distill and encourage. I think the conversation and being heard and felt and seen is one that is the biggest gap that we have right now. And I think there's a lot of things happening, especially with AI inserting itself as the computational layer of what these interactions look like, whether it's the consolidation of medical records or a lot of the data aggregation and processing that AI can do, that is taking that cognitive load and burden off of the clinician or physician, and will open up a chasm of opportunity for those conversations to happen without having to, look at your computer and as a physician and kind of type the whole time, right? When I think about a doctor's office visit, that is what I think about almost the entire time, right? Is kind of the floating keyboard, the screen, and okay, well, are you still taking this? Are you still doing that? Okay, blood pressure looks good. And that is not delightful. And I think that we need to and will move to a place where it's much more of a delightful conversation. In the next, over the very macro, in 50 to 70 years, I think the system will look significantly different, such that we'll laugh when we look back that this was the system. I think it's going to actually look so different that it's even hard to put in terms of what it looks like. It looks like today. I'm not sure that in that time frame we will be going to the doctor's office, right? I think that the same transition that we've seen in banking, we'll see in health. Right? In banking, you used to go to your local branch, you'd go to your teller, you do your business there, you'd sit down with a broker of some kind and receive your loan for your home, and everything was done in person. You go to your branch, right? And if we fast forward to today, what banking looks like, I can't tell you the last time I was at a bank. 99+% of all my banking I do on my phone on an app. I transfer money, I send money, I invest, all of those types of things. Now, there's still an important time when I need to go into the branch, maybe to get a mortgage or something of that kind. And I think that still serves a place, and it's important to still have that as an offering if people want to come to it. And we'll see the same transition in health, where the large majority of things are done in the comfort of your home, on your phone, extremely accessible, all centralized in that one way. And you'll still go in person to a doctor's office, a hospital, or a facility, of course, because health is very physical, when those things need to happen. But there's a lot and it's already started happening with the transition to telemedicine, given all that being galvanized by COVID. So I think that it's almost a complete reframe of those office visits that we think about might improve to start, and then will in some ways look completely different in the future.
What AI breakthroughs are going to transform human health?
It's a big one. There's so many. I think a really important one that I've heard quite a few people talk about is cost and efficiency. I think we're still at a point where we have really high capability and capacity in AI models, but there's a transition to efficiency that'll be really important from cost. I also think we're very much so in a phase of we haven't reached, obviously we haven't reached true AGI. We haven't reached a world where it's intuitively operating. We're still brokering, controlling, prompting, encouraging. It hasn't reached a point where of parity. I think that's a really, really interesting transition. So I think there's quite a few things. I think also as it becomes quite a bit more intuitive to interact with AI, I think that will be a massive transition, especially when you look at voice. I think that most of what's out there, or what I've seen out there with AI voice, is still a little bit clunky. There's some amount of latency that immediately lets you know, oh wait, I'm speaking to AI, because there's some sort of delay, there's some sort of clunkiness to it. I think in the next few years, we'll see AI voice come out to a point where you're like, I don't know if I'm talking to AI, and that's a massive transition. That once we transition there, you have when it comes to health and clinicians and clinicians of all kinds across the spectrum, we'll see some interesting things happen where it's like, I just had a 30-minute therapy session with AI and I wouldn't have known it was any different. Versus right now, at least everything I've interacted with, I think it can be useful, but I know it's AI and I'm not like fully immersed. I'm always thinking this is AI. But the transition is going to be when I forget that it's AI and I actually lean in and have a human experience because I've dropped that notion altogether.
How are we supposed to feel when we can't tell the difference between AI and humans?
Part of me is a little bit nervous because I don't know exactly what that looks like truly, and I don't know the implication that has for human to human connection. I think we will, in many ways, feel delighted. I think that we'll have this tool at our disposal at any point in time that, if inserted into the right moments, leveraged in the right way, and if it's complementary to our human interaction, I think we will feel delighted. We could feel nervous. We could feel a little bit scared. We could feel a little bit overwhelmed, right? Because I'm not sure what the next step of that is. So I think there's a lot of things we could feel.
Is it good or bad if we're talking to an AI therapist or an AI practitioner and they solve our problem? Like, how do we deal with the sort of the moral implication or this, future dystopia, scarcity culture of talking to an AI therapist or talking to an AI doctor, and it does solve our problem?
I think that if in the world that we have this low latency, high efficacy AI voice that in the context of therapy completely replaces all need for human therapists, and we've even stopped talking to each other. We're only talking to AI. I think there's something about that one could discern as bad. I don't think that that's entirely what will happen. And even if it does, I don't think it's this dystopian future that many think it would be. Because I think there's this new category that would be created of like, okay, there's this layer of AI therapy that happens, and then there's a check-in with a human, or there's a new role that's created, or a new level there, or layer that we didn't even see. So I think that this dystopian nature, someone thinking it's a bad thing, is because the frame of reference is, here's what we have today, and this thing's going to come replace what we have today, and there's not necessarily an awareness of what is tomorrow. But if we open up space to say, this is what we have today, and we're replacing what we have today, but I know that this better, greater, faster, whatever next thing is here for us to level up into tomorrow, I think that takes away a lot of the trepidation around AI and replacing. I think we've seen that across every other, the arc of adoption of technology. We've always unlocked a next level of exploration of some kind, and it's freed us up. So I think when you think about AI coming in for therapy, I'm really excited on the accessibility side. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. All of a sudden, we have this tool that, if deployed the right way and if made accessible, anyone can access it at any point in time in a moment of crisis or otherwise. That's absolutely beautiful. And there may be still a place and a unique value that we start to discern of why in-person therapy or specific modalities, or even therapy of some kind that includes psychedelic medicine or otherwise is that next layer and level, and that the CBT or otherwise in talk therapy is wonderful and can be handled by AI. So I think it frees us up to focus on what might be and will be higher order and higher impact things that we only uniquely can do as humans.
I choose to believe the same thing. I think we're looking at how technology has gone over the past 30 years. I don't think we've really seen the efficiencies that we thought we were going to get out of all of the software implementation over the last 30 years. Some, but I think with AI, we are truly going to create the new category, like you said. And I don't think we can understand or comprehend exactly where that will take us. And if we keep a focus on human connection, and if we keep a focus on happiness and joy and all of that, then we are going to unlock, I think, potentially even greater connection with self and with others. There are going to be downsides and unintended consequences, but I choose to believe we will unlock a new category because we will actually see efficiencies gained where we are not spending time, like you said, the doctor typing away on the floating keyboard, but instead looking you in the eyes and asking how you're doing, right? That's the change that I think will actually come from AI.
I agree. And I think we'll start to quickly discern what is it that as humans that only we can uniquely do. I don't think we have a good answer to that right now. I think there's a lot of beautiful things that we can do. We're highly adaptable. We're highly malleable. But once AI comes into the picture and we reach this AGI moment that is often talked about, what is it that because of consciousness, soul, spirit, this biology that we have is unique to us? I don't fully know that. And I think that by removing or starting to build AGI and unleash AGI and implement AGI, we'll discern, okay, wait, there was this 80% of stuff that is not unique to us. Now let's focus on the 20% that is. That might be conscious connection. I'm not actually sure. I think it'll be really interesting to see more people experiment with especially what is often traditionally called kind of the Eastern medicine side of things, or Eastern philosophies of spirit, of connection, of consciousness, that I would traditionally categorize in there, but they obviously have a big place in Western society as well. It'll be really interesting to see the proliferation of those modalities as well, as I don't think there's as much time spent, invested, or a science focus on them. I think right now they're often categorized as woo-woo or magic or these types of things. And I think something I've heard for Max from our Superpower team say very often is things that we consider magic today will become science tomorrow. And I think that AGI is a big piece of that, where 80% of the computational layer, otherwise the tactical execution of most of the things that we have to do will be solved for, and even far more efficient, cost-effective, accurate, compliant. Any variable you look at will be better. So we'll have no choice but to turn that way, and we'll unlock the more higher order priority things in terms of discovering spirit, soul, our existence, purpose here. I think there'll be a lot more time spent on that.
I love that point about the Eastern religions and focusing on spirit and soul, because again, I choose to believe that we are going to see extreme efficiencies and capitalism still has to run. So even if you want to remain a mechanic or doctor or whatever job may or may not change or get replaced, you don't really have a choice necessarily, because capitalism will still run. And if it's cheaper and as effective or more effective to do AGI agents for the job, then now you're freed up with time. You have to go replace your time with something. And most humans, although they might desire it now, cannot go sit on a beach, cannot go just lay around, cannot just go travel full time. And this will open up, I think, discovery of self. And the Eastern religions have been around for forever. And you almost might consider them first principle kind of thought leaders, right, in this wellness space. So I think that's a great point. As I'm talking more and more with people about this, again, I'm choosing to believe this side of it, that this is what will actually happen. There will be people that just get sucked into all the negative and that, but I think there's gonna be a lot of people that start to get more connected with self. So what can AI do for us right now or very soon? How close is AI to curing cancer?
That's a big one. To answer you specifically on the curing cancer piece, I think it's further than quite a few other things. I think curing cancer is a very complicated one in terms of the applications. think there's quite a bit more actual just like physical world research and discovery that needs to be done to actually aggregate the data. But I guess some of that could be simulated by AGI in some sense once we've, like encapsulated all of that. I think on the AI front, the most interesting piece is that AI already and will continue to be better at this computational layer. It will, and already does, consume far more data than us, does not forget it, can leverage it and access it instantly, right? That recall mechanism. So it's not just the storage piece, it's also the recall. And then can communicate it and translate it and leverage it in any way, shape, or form possible, in any language, in any format, visual, verbal, or otherwise, and faster than anyone else ever could. So I think that AI already does that really, really well and will continue to. I think the next step and evolution of that is this intuitive, this next layer of intuition and taste and common sense in some capacity. I'm not sure that's the right word, that it can discern what the right way to say it is to the individual in the moment with the context, cultural, visual, or otherwise, and presents it in a palatable way. I think right now, it's obviously prompt driven, right? So it's kind of just input, output, and that's beautiful. It's able to create really beautiful outputs. But I think that, we're obviously already getting to agents, and that'll be an interesting thing. It'd be really, really interesting to see what happens there.
Is AI going to help us live longer?
Absolutely. There's a variety of ways I see AI helping us live longer, whether that's on the true biotech, biopharma side of R&D and speeding up all the underlying processes upstream and downstream of that that need to push the latest innovations on that side, whether that's curing diseases, handling chronic conditions, or even pushing just health span and lifespan at general, regardless of those chronic conditions. There's a multitude of ways I think it will help us live longer. And then I think a point that's not talked about all that often, or I haven't heard it talked about, is AI will unlock and allow us to prioritize things that might be more important for health than we realize, which is actually deep connection and conversation, right? Time with our family, a moment to pause, journaling, all of these things that some people take time for now, many don't. And I think the proliferation of AI will allow us to shift our attention to some of those things, which I think hold a larger place in our health than is typically talked about in Western society. I think there's a variety of reasons we don't. I think that they're not always extremely monetizable and scalable. Like when someone wants to, so I think that that's an inherent construct or creative limitation that hasn't pushed us in that direction truly at scale and at the macro level. So AI will absolutely help us live longer and live better.
Yeah, what you're sort of describing is like a AI health coach or an AI personalized doctor. Should people be using ChatGPT to diagnose themselves right now? I
think, I'll talk about AI in general, and I think ChatGPT is one of the models someone could use. I think the challenge with using a general model, ChatGPT or otherwise, is the lack of data that model might have on you. I think it can be really effective. I think that just like you use a Google search and you go to WebMD, which is a bunch of, hey, caution, this is just general information, that's still most of the ChatGPT information that you might be receiving about your health is relatively generalized. I think once we have models and have platforms like Superpower that are ingesting all of your health data, bringing your wearables, bringing all those different components into one place, including blood work or otherwise, that's when AI gets really, really interesting. For, I guess, diagnosis is one of the things, discovery, and conversation around that. So I think today, I think it's an interesting tool. I think tomorrow it becomes one with the right context that is extremely powerful.
Right now, the average life expectancy is about 77 years. And the data says that we spend about 12 years at the end of our life living in a poor quality state on average. So at 65 years old, essentially our health and our quality of life start to degrade, and then we die at 77 on average. What is Superpower doing to help improve longevity and improve the quality of life?
We are unlocking and truly believe in a world of everyone having the capacity and ability to live 100 years. We are all put on this earth with that capacity. We have built today a digital health platform that allows people to interact with their health in a proactive, performance-oriented way, right? Come into Superpower, 100 plus biomarker blood tests, bring in your previous medical records, your wearables data to get this deep understanding of where you are today, and then an action plan and a full wraparound clinical team that you can interact with at any point to help understand how you can maintain and improve it tomorrow. So fundamentally, everyone living to 100 and living well to 100 or 100 plus looks like us interacting with our health proactively, establishing a baseline, really leaning into the data and data intelligence that helps us understand, okay, here's what I have in my genetics, here's what I can do about it proactively, here's the custom thing that and lifestyle that I should build. So that's what we're really enabling people to do is understand their data, take control and action on it in a way that prevents many of the chronic disease states that do come up and keep us at that asymptote of 77. And I also think we'll see not just I'm brute forcing my way from 80 to 100, just trying to make another year physically here on this earth, but that your 90s and 100s can look healthy, can look fun, can look cognitively sharp. I think there's a lot of novel things and early movement in peptides and otherwise that will help us get there. And today we're really focused on helping people take control and understand how to navigate themselves through the system that we've spoken about.
So what are the things that most impact our ability to have our 80s and 90s and 100s look amazing and feel amazing?
I think it's a few things. I mean, in terms of 80s, 90s, and 100s, I think there's a lot there. Fundamentally, I truly believe, and many obviously believe this as well, that it starts with really the fundamentals, right? Get good sleep as a foundation, get movement, put sunlight in your eyes in the morning, eat whole foods without pesticides, spend time with people that you love. All of those things are really important. Don't spend too much time on your phone. All of those different pieces are the foundations of what it really requires at a baseline. That's table stakes. And I think we know that. The interesting piece is how do we actually implement that and the behavior change and the systems that prohibit us maybe from doing those things or make it a little bit heavier and harder to do. In terms of 80s, 90s, and 100s, say looking like 40s and 50s, I think we'll see a complete shift to one of peptides and other novel therapeutics and otherwise that we're seeing come out right now that really enable us to stay sharp. Not that you'll necessarily only engage with those things in those ages, but we'll start to see the rapid adoption in the next, I personally think 8 to 12 years or so of those things at scale that'll allow us to reach that point. I also think I am optimistic about our system fundamentally, at least the food system and otherwise, really starting to shift. At the most macro level, we've seen a spotlight shift onto those things. And there's a lot of great work that people like Justin Mares and otherwise are doing in this space to make that change. I think that's also a fundamental component that we can't just get all the fish to swim upstream. We also need to be shifting the stream. And that will be a really important piece for us to get to that point, because I don't think the answer is always, test, realize I'm full of toxins, do a detox. 6 months later, test, realize I'm full of toxins, do a detox. And all that's perpetrated by the system that's feeding us those toxins in one shape or form, whether it's heavy metals or et cetera. I think inherently we'll need to remove the systemic choices that have been made that put those toxins in us in general. And that'll be what's required to get us to 90 and 100 looking healthy and exciting. And I think the most exciting piece about that is think about the opportunity, productivity, and just discovery of this existence that we have that happens when we have a population of billions of people where 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s, and hundreds look healthy, productive, autonomous. That is what I'm so interested in.
Yeah, because I mean, we look at our parents and our grandparents and we saw what happened to the majority of them, right? Is at some point they sort of became immobile, or something happened, or maybe it was a slow decline, but they stopped moving. They aren't necessarily able to cook their own food anymore. And the quality of life, it's hard to watch at some point, even though they're alive and their mind is still there and they're your mom, they're your dad. But then to think of like, okay, what does that mean for me? And how can I keep moving? Right. So where does mobility, and I guess the question I have is, you mentioned on Superpower's output is a comprehensive plan. And so what are the things that make up the plan for somebody? Because it's not just, oh, here's your blood sample, and then we're going to give you a shot and you're going to live to 100. You still have to do things.
Yeah, right? I mean, we may get to that point at some time in the near future, which I think is an interesting, whether it's a shot or a pill of some kind. It's an interesting thing that obviously the biohacking community and otherwise really leans into, and it's an interesting thought experiment of whether or not we can genetically or biologically really engineer ourselves. That's a kind of like an escape velocity that's interesting, which we don't have today. What are those recommendations? Right, they're different for everyone. So, but in general, right, we make recommendations across key pillars of health that you would expect, right? Whether that's movement, diet, sleep, exercise, things of that nature. And they're really intuitive, right, that allow you to take action on them. So I think oftentimes when you're going to your primary care physician or your health professional, you might come in and they say, okay, we've done 12 biomarkers, which we know is definitely not enough to get a whole picture of what's going on, but they do these 12 biomarkers. And then they say, well, your LDL and HDL are out of whack and you need to eat better and just start eating better. Here's maybe a one-sheeter that hasn't been refreshed in 15 years of how to go eat better. Thanks. See ya. There's no follow-up. There's no personalization. There is a huge cognitive load placed on the individual of, whoa, how do I go do this? Where do I go buy it? What does this mean? There's no container to actually start doing those things, right? And so what we've been really focused on is making it very personalized, making it very intuitive, making it really palatable, and then surrounding you with an AI health advocate that we have, as well as a clinical team that you can interact with at any point, right? That is proactively following up and going, hey, did you start doing those things that we had talked about that we'd recommended, right? Or if you have questions, you want, a very, to interact with our AI, you can go that way and say, well, what does this mean? And wait, these things have changed. What if I just got new blood work and I uploaded it? What does it now mean? Am I moving at the rate that I should? I think that once we have that unfettered access, that's really, really important to start encouraging people to move this way. Versus when you think of your primary care physician going back to that first visit, the concept of scheduling a follow-up visit in 3 months, for them, I've never seen that done proactively to check in of like, oh, well, how did you do those recommendations I told you about? Or let's do more blood work and see have you done those things? That's important. Let me follow up with you. That just doesn't happen. And then if you try and do that and say, well, I just want to check in on the plan that we put together. And I just want to share with you how it's been and what my challenges have been. And those different pieces, maybe we do a couple more tests because there were some things that were really critical and I've started supplementing vitamin D or eating more salmon or otherwise. I want to see if it's actually making a difference, or maybe there's some more testing we need to do around methylation and it's not necessarily one of et cetera. That's not an exploratory proactive health motion that is being run by the system. And fundamentally, it's not just the personalization, the palatability that is in the recommendations, but also the fact that you have the ability to interact with it, get more testing at any point in time, do specialty testing right on your gut microbiome, and we'll be launching more specialty testing and services in the near future that allow you to do that. So it's a completely different model that allows for people to take control and be their own advocate in a lot of ways, in a way that isn't extremely burdensome, right? We've done a lot of the lifting and built the platform for people that intuitively encourages you through this process to do so, rather than what some people may have been doing previously, which is trying to work on spreadsheets and get this perspective and this article and kind of build this whole thing themselves. We've built that for people.
And then how do wearables fit into the future of AI healthcare?
Wearables are really interesting and really exciting. I mean, I'm even wearing an Oura ring, and I think they're beautiful, right? Because I think health for a very, very long time has been all point in time data, right? We go to the doctor and get a blood pressure tested. We go to the doctor and get blood work done and urine analysis and things of that nature. And if we're even doing it, we might only do that once a year. Now, with the world of wearables, there is continuous daily metrics, right? They're improving their accuracy all the time, right? Heart rate variability and blood oxygen levels and all sorts of things that we're seeing. That's really, really interesting. That continuous data stream on an individual, especially when you think about sleep quality and movement and the behavior change that it can encourage, but because of the gamification. I think that the longitudinal data of how is my health this week and how is my health this month and this quarter is also really interesting. I'm excited to see the world of wearables move that way, as well as the daily kind of habit tracking things. I think that is a necessary movement that I'm really excited about. And then with AI, there's a massive increase in the amount of data, which I think is obviously wonderful and needed for AI to be effective. And all of that daily data is encouraging people to actually interact with the AI. So regardless of the AI being effective, and I'm using AI just as this very nebulous general term, people are building this habit of interacting with it daily because the data stream is daily. So I think that's there's those two things together are working in our favor.
There's like continuous blood glucose monitors. Do you see the future of like having a continuous or semi-continuous blood panel monitor? So if you're taking 100 markers, are we going to be wearing a sampler that tests for the 100 markers and we have daily, weekly, monthly tracking of our blood?
It's a good question. I'm wearing a CGM right now. So I am a big fan of CGMs and very personalized nutrition. I think that's just a really, really fascinating place where people can truly optimize their health, is understanding based on their genetics and ethnic background, how and where they're interacting with food and what that's doing for their energy levels and a variety of other things. So I think that is a really fascinating thread. In terms of your question on daily, weekly, monthly blood, I think it really depends on the individual, right? And what their goals are and what they're looking to solve for or optimize for. I think it will be different for everyone. There's going to be some people that want to do it weekly. I do think, and I'm by no means a clinician, there is a certain cycle of blood work that everything I've seen is about 8 weeks where you're really going to see movement in certain critical biomarkers. So on a weekly basis, I'm not sure it would be that interesting, other than maybe at the hormone level. I've seen, quite a bit of movement, especially daily cortisol tracking throughout the day, and other hormone measurement I think is really interesting on the daily or weekly or monthly level. I think blood work in most cases will still be a quarterly, biannually, panel that we're doing. In most cases, maybe there's a truncated panel of very special circumstances. If you're considering CGMs, blood, I think that will continue to persist as something that people do. So I think there's just an inherent, limiting factor around the biology of the blood recycling itself on certain cadences that makes it more effective to, I don't see weekly or that nature in most cases making sense.
Bryan Johnson has optimized for longevity. What are the trade-offs to doing a Bryan Johnson type routine and having this continuous data and monitoring and strategies for implementation to improve your health?
I think the trade-offs are similar trade-offs for anything that we do, which is when I choose to do A, I'm also inherently choosing to not do B. And so I think in Bryan's case and anyone that is in, that is really focusing on optimization, performance and longevity, the question, just like any, is how much time do I spend on A, and am I okay with not spending time on B? And I think everyone has to make that decision in every way, shape, and form of their life. How much time do I spend working? And I'm also inherently choosing not to spend time on my family or sitting on that beach that you mentioned earlier. So I think I'm really, really fascinated to see what happens with Bryan. I think it's him outsourcing a lot of his data, and the journey that he's going through is a really interesting experiment, and we'll see a lot of discovery come out of it. So I think it's just a choice he's made in terms of how to balance his time, and it seems to be working for him. And I think for every one of us, it's a little bit of an individual choice of how much do I spend time doing this versus that. And for him, it seems like this is the new frontier, and there's obviously a great community of people that's rallied around it.
How much do an individual's genetics come into play when thinking about the future of healthcare?
Genetics is a foundation. There's obviously, and there's an inherent genetic component, and there's genetic expression. I think genetic expression is really interesting, especially when you think about the foods you eat and the environments that you're in, and how gene expression is manipulated by those things. So I think that's a really fundamental component that will require quite a bit more research to really understand what that means for the individual. But I think it will be fundamental, right? You see companies like Nucleus and quite a few others pushing in this space to understand our genetic code. I think will be really, really fundamental, and how we can actually fundamentally manipulate it, right? Not just on the expression side of what are we consuming, what environments are we putting ourselves in that shift what gene expression, but can we snip and taper that code, right? We're already seeing that, it's some point with CRISPR and otherwise. Like that's kind of an interesting, really, really interesting cutting edge thing. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Okay,
so what is expression? What is genetic expression?
Yeah, so genetic expression is this process of, based on what you're consuming or the environment that you're in, specific pieces of your genetics being expressed. So that's like the most simple, and once again, asterisk, definitely not a clinician. That's the most simple interpretation that and how I think about it. I think that we have a lot of work to do on what does that actually mean? How does that work for you versus me? And I also fundamentally think, I'm sure there's much more nuance to this. But my sense is that we'll fundamentally end up where we started, at least on the foundational level, which is if I eat whole foods, I eat leafy greens, I do the things I'm supposed to do. From the gene expression side, it works out, right? And that's a very fundamental, simplistic, statement and perspective there. There will be some real nuance of if I want to optimize and I want this gene to express and this one not to, because I think this one does this thing and that one does another. I think that's where you get into kind of the optimization longevity side of things. But fundamentally for many people, it will look like, oh wait, I need to do the things I kind of always knew I knew I needed to do. And then maybe there's some sort of specific customization around nutrition based on ethnic background or otherwise that genetics obviously is linked to. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Okay, that's interesting then about how are we globally impacted, or what will healthcare look like globally given the advent of your product and services and AI and the difference in genetics across the world?
Yeah, I think globally is an interesting question because there obviously isn't one system that wraps around the entire globe. So it's hard to say because I think they'll in the near future, for not quite far off in the future, from my perspective, will we see something that is ubiquitously accessible at the global scale? Because I think there's just so many different components to deploy that, right? I think fundamentally we are shifting to consumer health, individuality, self-direction, autonomy. And that is not just happening here in the US, that's happening globally and will continue to happen through platforms like ours at Superpower and others that are building in the space as well.
Okay. And so something like malaria in Africa, how do we, and I don't know if you're an expert in this or if this is something that you want to talk about, but like how does Is there anyone trying to take on stopping the spread of malaria or AIDS and in tech? Does the individuality component help combat the global component or the macro component?
It's an interesting question. First, I think there's probably wonderful, great people out there in tech combating these macro global health challenges. Absolutely. Definitely not an expert in those specific pieces there. Whether it's in tech or philanthropically, I know there's a lot of people focused in those epidemics at the global scale. I think when we talk about the relationship between the individual and like global health, I think the autonomy of the individual isn't necessarily one that solves for the proliferation of the disease state or condition or otherwise. I think the autonomy that's unlocked of the individual allows them to solve for their specific case, which I think is a really important bottoms up kind of solve to say, okay, well, if I have malaria or not even malaria, let's just call it any global disease state, I have the understanding to catch it earlier, understand what foundational lifestyle changes I can make or already should be making such that I solve for it or don't get it in the first place. And I think that kind of like bottoms up individual solve is important and needs to be complemented by the kind of top down, okay, we actually need to cure the disease state or solve for it at the biotech pharma side. And it's really just being really general because there's many different disease states and chronic conditions out there at the global level. But I think they're very complementary, right? We have to have the grassroots individual and the macro push.
Yeah, I think there was a program implemented at some of the airlines that were flying in and out of Africa. And there was an AI tool implemented that discovered or detected malaria in 40% of the pilots earlier than they would have. So like before they had symptoms, it was detected by AI. And so I think what I heard you say, part of this is like, well, if they're individualized, then there's going to be early detection. So yes, there's going to be cures going on, but also just early detection is going to prevent spread of these diseases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that in any chronic condition or disease state that you look at, early detection is absolutely fundamental, right? When you're dealing with a chronic, pervasive, metastatic, stage 4, any label that you want to slap on it that has existed and festered and grown and established itself within an organism, it's much, much harder and very much so limits the rectifying correction, whether it's pharma, lifestyle, or otherwise, that you can actually take to solve for it. Your window of opportunity, obviously, in catching it much early and detecting it much earlier is fundamental, and even more so upstream of that, operating and constructing an organism that doesn't open itself up for exposure or self-defends itself, immune system or otherwise, from even exposing itself to that disease state. I think that's where we're most focused.
Okay, help me understand what you just said a little bit more. So you're saying you're changing or you're working on changing the way the body responds?
No, just that the fundamental changes that we make at the lifestyle level or otherwise do change the way that our body is able to combat, respond to, and interpret a disease state.
What I've seen has been that sick people are sick. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like, if we don't do the things that we're required to do, if we don't do the things that we need to do to keep ourselves healthy, whatever that is, whole foods, moving, working out, getting rid of toxins, it's easier to get sick and stay sick?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if we don't do the foundational things, we're not getting the sleep that we need to, we're not eating the whole foods, we're not getting the movement, we open ourselves up and to a system that is very much so exposed to a pathogen, et cetera, anything that would compromise the health of the system. I mean, if you think about it in like outside of the body, it's the same thing with any other gated system, right? If you look at a specific network, if there isn't a firewall, just like the immune system, something maybe a bad actor could get in that has different incentives. So I think it's important to maintain a very balanced organism and system that thwarts any efforts of an outside disease state, however it might come in.
60% of the calories that are consumed by Americans are highly processed. What are we supposed to do about combating the food that we eat, or finding and eating the food that can help us be healthier?
And I'll go even one step further, and they're ultra processed. I think it's even stronger than highly processed. They're ultra processed. They are manufactured, right? There are full systems in labs that are dedicated to helping you understand what is the exact amount of salt and sugar that we need to put in this thing to get you to eat one more chip, right? Because the incentive is to sell more bags of chips, and that's there's a whole incentive structure there, right? I think number one, it starts with awareness and education. First, people need to understand that what they're eating is not healthy for them. What they're eating is ultra processed. It has all these effects on their body. I think that's really, really important. It's just opening people's awareness to what they've been born into. The status quo of the food that's being typically consumed is not healthy. I still think there's a lot of work to be done on that side. Then from there, once the awareness is there, it's all about providing the access, right? So you have whole swaths of cities and spaces in the US that are food deserts, right? There's not really access to healthy food, right? So it makes it that there's this Sisyphean task, this hurdle to jump over of actually getting access. So even if you're aware, it's like, okay, wait, I want to take action, but it's so hard that I can't. So I think that's the second piece is making it ubiquitous and an easier choice to make. And I think that happens at the systemic level when you think about the food system. And then the second piece I think that I'm always really interested in is how do we, start to mold and bend the social and cultural norms of the food that we eat. I think a lot of ultra processed foods have found their way into cultural rituals, and I think that's a really obviously an intentional, sticky mechanism and strategy that's been used to continually and pervasively insert a brand, a food, a thing that might not be super healthy into our everyday meals and family meals and things of that nature. And not to say that, my perspective is more so that it's not that we all need to be monks. I don't think that we need to only eat leafy greens and we need to eat our greens, before our proteins, before our carbs. We can only eat organic. We need to do those things. I think that, and I obviously steal this from quite a few others, that balance is by far the most important thing. And that the bag of chips you have with your dad and the beer sitting on the couch watching, the football game that you guys got together to watch on a Sunday, that's also health. And sure, could that, that plate of chips or otherwise be something, a healthier choice? Absolutely. And I think that's really important. And I think that we shouldn't shame ourselves for leaning into those moments and finding balance in that. Spending time with dad is also health. And that's really, really important. And if that means that it's the bag of chips on the table, then that's what it means. And that doesn't have to be like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that thing because, I don't want to go spend time with dad because it's going to mean a couple beers and some chips. So therefore I'm making better choices on my food. And I can't even come over because that's a choice he's making and I won't make it. I think there's a balance there at the individual level of viewing the consortium of things that are happening around food as health, right? That's really, really fundamental. And the things that we often might consider unhealthy food are often unhealthy really because of the way the pesticides and the upstream decisions that have been made. I think the most insidious thing is the actual truly ultra processed. It's not the lasagna or the pasta, right? You look at other cultures, other societies, and things are going just fine, right? You look at the blue zones, right? So I think that it's not just the food, it's the container it sits in, it's the thing that happens before and after, it's the upstream systemic choices that are made, but generally staying away from the ultra processed foods is fundamentally something that true clinicians, not myself, are always underscoring, which I think is important.
Yeah, there's more education out there now about the manufacturing of the food. I like how you put it. Food is manufactured to keep you eating more of it, and it's less food than it used to be now, meaning it's closer to a manufactured product than a whole food than it ever has been. A Lay's potato chip 50 years ago was probably just salt, potato, and oil. And then now there's stuff in there that literally is tricking your brain into continuing to eat more and more and more in such a way that as soon as you put the chip in your mouth, you take a bite, they figured out how to then trick your brain before you've even finished that chip to be picking up another chip to go continue to eat it. What do we do about combating that level of manufacturing and manipulation against people that maybe don't even know that that's going on? And like, how are people supposed to combat the ultra manufacturing of foods?
I mean, I think at the individual level, it really starts with consumer decision making. So the wallet is your most powerful tool, I think, as a consumer. So the more that you're voting with your wallet and not choosing those options, inherently, big brands have to respond to consumer preference, and that ultimately is going to be the bellwether for fundamentally how we change things, given like the structure of our capitalistic society. And at the same time, there's a lot of great things happening at the highest levels as we see, the banning of certain food dyes in our foods and endocrine disruptors in our toothpaste and things of that nature, anything that we're consuming is really important. But at the consumer level, it's most important just to make the decision from a spend that makes the XYZ brand say, oh, wow, wait, these aren't really moving off the shelves. Looks like people want this. We're going to give them what they want, right? And I think that's the most important piece. And people just having these conversations, right? I think the work that you're doing in providing an opportunity for people to have a platform and share these types of things and have these types of conversations, I think is really, really crucial.
Yeah, because I view it sort of as like an addiction, right? Like people that get addicted to alcohol or other drugs, harder drugs, weed, whatever, it's the chemical change in their bodies that is keeping them addicted, right? And it's a very hard decision for them to make to stop doing that stuff. And so if you grew up in a family as a kid that was eating Oreos all the time and overeating Oreos and chips and everything, and you didn't understand the education or what was going on, you're in a food desert, it feels like a really hard thing for anyone to be able to change or even know that they need to change and that the food is designed to keep them sick.
Yeah, I think that's the first piece is educating people on like the fundamentals of the decisions that are being made, why they're being made, and all of those pieces. And I think a lot has been done in that regard. And then just also shifting the social stigma of not choosing those things, right? I think there's still a bit of a stigma of like, oh, you're trying to be healthy, or oh, you're on a diet, or in certain places. And I think that's a really important piece because if people are aware, they want to make a choice and an autonomous decision to prioritize their health and vote with their wallet or however you might call it. It's the social container that makes it really hard and the culture that makes it really hard to do that. So it has to be a seismic shift in how we think about our food, which I think is already really happening in a lot of regards, right? You look at the kind of sober, curious movement and people consistently choosing less alcohol or non-alcohol or only a drink or two. Behavior is already significantly changing, and I think it's because of a lot of the modeling that's being done at the highest levels, right? The people that we look up to, the celebrities, the luminaries, the influencers of one frame or another are starting to be people that prioritize their health, right? Health is looked at as a status symbol, right? And it's that weaving of value of health as a status symbol that is going to drive behavior. Show me the incentive and I'll show you the behavior. And I think it's all about driving incentives. The incentive for many people is to fit in with the in group, right? Not cause any ruckus, to say, oh no, I'm actually not going to eat that thing. I brought my own thing. So that's the incentive. And so I think the more that we shift the in-group choice to be one of health by shifting society and culture, it becomes much more easier to actually do that thing. But if you're just trying to do it at the individual level, I mean, you would never go out to eat. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, if you're surrounding yourself with marathon runners or triathlon athletes and you're out to lunch and they all order salads, you're probably going to get a salad, right? Unless you're George Costanza. Maybe there's an outdated reference, but ordering the T-bone for lunch just because he wants the T-bone. But the fundamental principle there is, You have to be aware and you have to make a decision as an individual, and you have to be willing to go upstream and endure the discomfort of the change that you're trying to make. And so talking about upstream, what are the things that we don't understand about the upstream growing and processing of our food?
I think there's quite a few things that aren't pervasively well understood. I think one of them is the truly detrimental effects that pesticides can have on our system, right? And there was a story once. I'm from California and grew up in the Bay Area, and there's this town of Watsonville that's about an hour south of where I grew up. And there is a lot of farming. Gilroy right nearby is the garlic capital, and there's a lot of food produced there. And all of the farm workers have families and live in the area, and there's a school for those children nearby the farms. And that school is a real story. Happens to be downstream downwind of the farms. So all these pesticides are being sprayed onto, it's a lot of strawberries and things of that nature that are grown in that area. And inherently, some of that is blowing into the wind and making its way all the way down to the schools. And young children are seeing and being taken to hospitals in Stanford or otherwise, seeing unbelievable disformities and disease states happen from these things that we are spraying on our food and then we end up consuming. So that is one thing that I think some people think about. Some people wash their foods, and I'm not sure that's fully enough. I don't know if people know the magnitude and the degree to which there is poison being placed on the mass amounts of our food at scale. I think people know it's kind of a bad thing. It's not a great thing. I want to try and eat organic if I can. But I don't know if people realize that there's a lot being done here. And a lack of awareness at the highest levels of what these things might even do to us until they start doing them. That's what I think. There's lack of awareness. I think some people think, oh, well, they've got it all figured out and they must have done the testing. They must know that this thing that they're spraying on or not is actually safe for us and it comes off with water, no big deal. I think there's this assumption of clarity and confidence at the highest levels that it actually really isn't there. And that the incentive is to produce more, bigger strawberries faster, and that it's not necessarily one of prioritizing the nutrient density. I think it's another thing people don't talk about all that much in the mainstream is the actual nutrient density, right? A strawberry or a vegetable or food today will have far more caloric capacity, if that's a word, and far less nutrient density. So you have to eat far more strawberries to actually get the nutrients that you would have otherwise received. So even when you think you're making the healthy choice of the strawberry or the spinach or the leafy green or what have you, it's not as actually nutrient dense. You have to consume far more calories to get that same nutrient profile. And
that's because of a couple things. That's because of GMO and just the way we farm and then the way that they've designed the crops and monocrop, right?
Yeah, monocrop, soil health, right? The diversity of nutrients in the actual soil that these crops are interacting with. Definitely not an expert on the space, but I think there's a multitude of factors that go into the foundation, the soil that we're using, the pesticides that we're spraying, the genetic engineering of it, as well as obviously monocrop being a pervasive strategy that's used that has put us in that place.
So what the hell do we do about this on an individual level?
I think we have to, as much as we can, make choices that help us swim upstream to some degree. Choose the organic thing if you can. Wash at a minimum, just do the thing that's accessible to you, right? So if it is, hey, I can't really afford to buy all organic everything. All right, then there's a select 10 that typically hold more pesticides than others. Just focus on those, that select group of ones that you can try and buy organic, right? Or buy at a farmer's market, right? Or if it isn't buying organic, it's washing things beforehand. Or trying, there's so many things that you can be done. I think everyone thinks I've got to do all of this stuff. Otherwise, it's all or nothing. I think for most people, it's start with the one thing that you can do, and that just because you can't buy all organic, doesn't mean that you aren't taking a step in the right. I think there's just like kind of this defeatist nature that if I can't do all of it, then I'm not going to do any of it. And I think that all or nothing mentality is a really insidious mechanism that stops us from actually making change in the direction that we want to. You don't have to be perfect, and that even just eating organic once is still a good thing that you've just did. Doesn't mean you have to eat organic all the time. So I think that finding value in every even micro decision is important.
But why is it always on us as the individual living in this system that we have to put up with that system? Right? Like, why is it always that? So for example, we used to recycle a ton. We used to spend a bunch of time and energy splitting stuff out, rinsing the jars out, all this. And at some point, my wife and I were like, we're not doing this anymore. Like, it's not making a dent. We found out that it's all just getting shipped off to China anyways.
Yeah.
And that's true. Why don't the companies, why doesn't the system change? Why doesn't the government say this isn't good for our people? Like, why is it always on the individual?
It's a really great question. I think that we have created a system of incentives that has gotten us to this place. And I think the moment that we find a way to pivot that incentive system to reward what is maybe the altruistic choice of maintaining a healthy individual, a healthy society, is when we will see the large scale shifts. Because I agree with you, it is all on the individual right now. In many ways, I still think we've seen a lot of progress in systemic shifts in healthy food being accessible. You look at even like something like a Sweet Green or otherwise is a great, I love Sweet Green. I eat it there all the time. Is a great option for people. Then it's almost in all major cities that I travel to. So it's like, oh, wow, that just made it super accessible for me. I can go there. I know there's no seed oils. I know it's organic. I know it's local. I know what they stand for. And so I think there are some things being done. There's definitely things being done at the consumer level that make it much more accessible to the individual. I think at the systemic level and the macro level, it just takes more time for us to get there. And I'm optimistic about us getting there. It just takes some time.
Okay, you mentioned seed oils. And I've talked to some other folks, I didn't know this, but there's people that also like don't like touching receipt paper. And there's a lot of people that focus a lot on these like really, what I would call like micro things. Even maybe buying organic could be considered one of those things. When you're 50, 100 pounds overweight, or you're eating chips and Doritos and junk food all the time. Like, should people be focusing on seed oils, or should people be focusing on mobility and caloric intake first?
Well, I think that, I guess, I somewhat reject the notion that it is either or. And I think that any shame that's placed on an individual for making a healthy choice, whether it's at the macro or micro level, is just inherently not productive. I think that if the step in the direction of being healthy is at the micro level to start, of buying organic, not touching the receipt paper, not consuming seed oils, that's still a good step. And in isolation, regardless of the other macro things that, yes, definitely have more impact, that still is a great thing to do. And just because it's not like the value of that micro decision on health is not dependent on the macro choice. Now, the macro choice is important, might have far more impact, right? Absolutely, on the system. But I still think we should support, uplift the people that are still making those micro decisions, right? Because it's not just about, I think, their individual health, but also the choice that they're making and communicating into the greater fabric of society, that this is what matters to me and this is what matters to us. And that we see systemic change when all those choices are made at the individual level. So even if their vote is one vote of, I'm not going to touch the receipt paper, or 1,000 votes of, I'm only going to buy, I'm not going to eat out, or I'm not going to all buy these big brands, I still love the one vote. I don't say, hey, wait, you only did one vote. You could have done 1,000. Now, I think it's obviously those micro decisions of not touching the receipt paper, if they are taking up capacity and used in place of the macro decision that is getting mobility and movement and sleeping well, then I think that is inherently not necessarily the best choice. But so yeah, I think it's nuanced, but I think that we should continue uplifting people of making healthy choices, regardless if it is the small nuanced thing. But I can understand the perspective people have of the cognitive dissonance. It's like, oh, well, you don't touch the receipt paper, but you're not doing the foundational things that are really important. But Yeah, I always try and I think we need to shift to one of more compassion and uplift in general to encourage people to continue doing those things.
I think that's a great perspective to have. There's just times where there's this old adage of like, oh, I got to get my protein. I got to get my protein, right? That's like ingrained in the US culture, right? I got to get my protein. But then they don't move at all. They don't get their 10,000 steps. They're consuming 3,000 to 5,000 calories a day, but it's because they want to get their protein, and that seems healthy to them. And so it feels counterintuitive, or even like, I don't know if it's an excuse, but it's like, oh, I just want to eat this food, and so I'm going to say I'm getting my protein.
Yeah, I think people, I think inherently we are looking for the quick win, the quick solve, the go-to thing that is just like my one thing. And I think the more that we shift from not viewing health as a product to be purchased, and more of a consortium of lifestyle choices, I think that's the shift we need to make, and that's going to shift over time. There's going to be times when you're not going to be able to get all the sleep that you need, whether it's a career piece or you're a new parent, and you're going to instead do this other thing. And it's I'm only getting 6 hours sleep right now, and that's not so great, but I'm doing this other thing, and it's a system, so that when the sleep comes down, the other pieces are still standing. So I do agree with the sentiment that viewing it as a system rather than this like quick fix of, let me make sure I get my protein in the example you gave, is really important.
And so what are you doing to provide access to healthcare for everyone?
Well, we're building Superpower. So a digital health platform that is accessible across the US at a really affordable price point, right? We're $500 a year, which is much more accessible than a concierge care clinic that you might go to, or another clinician that actually doesn't necessarily even typically practice this model that we are. So it's this digital proliferation of the service and modalities and model that we are opening to people that is very much so enabling access, and then obviously lowering the price point significantly for people to get 100 biomarkers tested, receive an action plan, start taking action on it, and interact with the clinical team to understand what it means for them. That's a really important step.
And so what does success look like for you in helping people gain access to all this information?
Success for us, and I think success for us is also, I'll talk about it as a category, right? Because I think that there very much so is, a rising tide raises all boats, right? So I think there's us at Superpower that are doing this. There's a lot of people that are doing this in the space. And I think what success looks like is more people engaging with this mental model of health, which is proactive, early, often, ingrained into identity, very much so data-centered, aggregated, centralized, accessible. I think that's what success looks like, is more and more people graduating to that motion in their life, and whatever that might look like for them. So it's more people shifting their mindset to this way.
Great. Albe, this has been incredible. Where can people get in touch with you? Where can they find Superpower? How can they connect?
Well, so we're at superpower.com. I'm all over the place. I'm LinkedIn and Instagram, I guess, and people can always hit me up there. And but yeah, superpower.com is where anyone can find us, and always happy to have conversations, jam, bat things around. Everything that I've shared today is very much so written in pencil, and is always an idea that I'm open and often very much so encourage people to challenge. Because I'm not here necessarily thinking, oh, this is what's right. I think that we need to radically embody a learning mindset. So that I welcome that from anyone who wants to reach out.
That's right. Let me ask one more question just at the end here. What differentiates you from every other tech health company out there?
Differentiates us is a few things, right? On the product side, there's a litany of features that we have, others might not. There's an ecosystem that we believe, and many who have experienced the product believe, is a really powerful one, right? When you put all the components that we have together of the deep data on your health, the action plan, the AI component. We also have a marketplace that when all of that comes together, not very many people are really, no one else is building that ecosystem. They might have little parts of it, and they might do these parts really well, but no one's building that all together. So that's the product side without getting into the nitty-gritty details of it. And the even more exciting for me piece of that is the brand that we're building, right? We are building a culturally resonant, consumer-oriented, health lifestyle brand that completely shifts the mental model of how people think about their health, right? We have these Superpower hoodies that I'm wearing, right? No one's necessarily really walking around with a Blue Cross Blue Shield or a Kaiser hoodie. And while those systems are really important, it's also really important to view health as exciting, as something that we do talk about, something that we engage with in community, right? We're already seeing that with run clubs and Othership and all these different modalities. So all that to say, the brand that we're building is extremely different than anyone else in the space. And we fundamentally believe that will drive the community, the sense of identity and belonging that is really inherently the foundation of shifting your whole model of how you think about your health. It's an identity shift more than anything else. And it starts with building community, and that starts with building a foundationally resonant brand that speaks to people.
I think that's great. And what are you doing with the data that you're collecting or not doing with it?
Yeah. No, I mean, we all the data that we do have is very much so HIPAA secured. We don't actually do anything with that data other than you can interact with it through your AI health advocate, but we don't do anything with that data, nor do we plan to do anything with that data.
Yeah, it's all about helping the consumer and get them healthier.
Yeah, I mean, it's your data is your own. So if at any point in time you want to export all of your data from Superpower, clear it out for whatever reason, right? We give people that ability. Not many people have taken us up on that, but it's something that you can do. Because at the end of the day, our focus is at providing people the control and the autonomy, and data is a really significant component of that. On the data side, I think it'll be really interesting to see the longitudinal changes that these types of modalities and platforms, the health shifts. It'll be interesting to see what trends we see.
And then are you connecting with practitioners in real life, or is it just the AI with online team models?
So right now, we provide you an action plan that our clinical team, a marriage of our clinical team and AI put together. And then you're able to interact with your clinical team via chat at any point in time, right? So ask questions. It's a real clinician actually answering you.
Great. Cool. Albe, thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate it. And as always, everybody, I appreciate you. I love you. This has been For Your Own Good. Peace.